Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Green. Thank you for joining us for the November 21 housing market update, where we're going to try to take this complex idea of the United States housing market and what's going on with it and make it really simple for you to understand. And we're going to get you in and out of this thing within 30 minutes. That's what we try to do every month. So let's jump right in. We have a great panel lined up for you of experts to kind of comment on the slide deck that you're about to see. All right. So the first thing that I want to remind you about that we touched on last month was not depreciation, but deceleration. In other words, prices in the housing market, prices are not declining. They're not depreciating. They're just the rate at which they're increasing is slowing down, i.e. deceleration. We're seeing a sign of that in the showings, okay? This is data from Showing Time, which is the major system that all realtors use to schedule their showings. And this is a leading indicator of what's really happening in the housing market. And it's always good data to look at. And you can see that, you know, it's really fallen off, okay? From the peak back in April, May, June, July, August. But that said, that's a seasonal fluctuation, right? Because usually you see the most amount of showings happening during the first part of the year, into spring, into summer, and it cools off. But what's important to note is that, you know, you can see all the way back to January where we left off. It's still a very high number in comparison to just regular months in general. All right. So the next slide here gives us a little bit more of an indicator. So here is the Showing Time index over the last 5 Septembers. Okay. So this September in 21 was less than that of September in 2020, but much greater than that of 19, 18, and 17. So although the number of showings is decreasing comparative to last year, it's still more robust, much more robust than it was in previous years. Now, the other thing that's important to note as we look at all the numbers comparing to where we are now to 2020 is you have to remember there was a shutdown, a lockdown in the early, you know, in the springtime of 2020. And then it really took some time for things to get moving in the housing market into the fall. So we had an exceptionally busy fall last year because there was pent up demand of transactions that just could not take place earlier in the year. So pretty much every metric that we look at, it should be less than that of 2020. That's important to note. So the other thing that's important is you're going to start to see out there some more headlines because, you know, people getting scared are going to look at headlines. Let me walk that back. Scary headlines attract more eyeballs, right? So of course the reporters are going to try to scare people into reading their, you know, magazine or blog post or whatever it is that they're writing. Here are a couple examples. Foreclosures are shooting up. Is it a repeat of early 2000s housing crisis? I mean, that's a big claim when basically, yes, foreclosures were up month over month, but over a very low mark from the previous month. And it's just a month over month increase, not necessarily year over year. And where we are in relation to the 2000s is far lower. You know, here's another headline. Refinance originations will drop 62%. So the overall headline was that, you know, mortgages are going to drop by 70%. But when you look at the finer details of it, 62% of it has to do with refis, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because rates were at historic lows for such a long time, and there was a ton of refi opportunity happening, but it doesn't mean that the purchase side of mortgage originations are going to have a steep decline because, in fact, mortgage originations for the purpose of buying a home are forecast to rise 9%. So you have to watch what the headlines are saying. It's just a word of caution to those that are out there. And we're starting to see that these negative headlines are starting to impact the general public. So currently 1 in 3 people believe now is a good time to buy. And that's a relatively low number in our opinion, because it's actually a very good time to buy, all things considered. We're going to take a look at some metrics in just a little bit. But when you couple the fact with mortgage rates are on the rise and so are the price of homes, it obviously makes sense to buy now versus a year from now. Okay, because the cost of your borrowing is going up and the cost of the asset that you're purchasing is going up. So it is a good time to buy, but yet people don't think that because they're thinking that maybe there's a bubble on the horizon, this, that, the other thing. Home sales forecasted to increase this year and also to perform well into 2022. So, this is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, National Association of Realtors is NAR and MBA, which is Mortgage Bankers Association. So when you take a look at 21, everyone's projecting, these are projecting them, the overall market, United States market, to finish off at these numbers and to basically come out ahead in 2022 of where we are in 21, which is interesting. So they're forecasting an even better year in 2022. But again, everybody is forecasting a deceleration in home price forecast, right? So we saw double-digit price appreciation from 2019 to 2020, and then from 2020 to 2021, there was double-digit increase. Now we're seeing a lower rate of increase, but still an increase, okay? And here is what, some of these experts are saying and their organizations are forecasting for 2022. So the point is, it looks like all signs are pointing to yet another solid year in 2022 and another year of price appreciation in 2022, albeit a much more normal level of price appreciation. Mortgage rates, big discussion. I think there's going to be a lot to be said about mortgage rates. And you can see that, back in, where is this? This is 18. This is all the way through. So back in 2018, rates were almost up to 5%. They came way down, a precipitous decline, which basically happened at the end of 2020. And it came up and it went down, and now we're kind of leveling off, but things are headed back up. So this looks like, if you just look at the chart, it looks like a substantial increase. But when you look at the raw number here, 3.6, even if it's 4%, those are historically low rates, And I think this quote says it well, which is right now we forecast mortgage rates to average 3.3% in 2022. This is this person's, Doug Duncan from Fannie Mae. That's his opinion, which, though slightly higher than 2020 and 21, by historical standards remains extremely low. I fully agree with that. I mean, that is a terribly low rate, very good low rate for anybody who's looking to buy a home, whether it's their first home or their 10th. So nothing really to cry about there. So the bottom line, if you are in a position to buy, now is the time to do it. I agree with that. It's not necessarily going to get any cheaper to buy within the next 12 to 18 months, so far as we can see. Mortgage rates and home pricing are slated to increase, to rise through 2022. Here's just a look at the mentality of the American homeowner right now. 64% of American homeowners say living through a pandemic has made their home more important to them than ever before. 83% of homeowners say their home has kept them safe during the pandemic, and 91% of homeowners say they feel secure, stable, or successful owning a home. Okay, that is a remarkable difference than before the pandemic. All right. There was a huge trend of people renting versus buying, moving to metropolitan areas, being very transient, taking jobs, moving around, relocating, this, that, the other thing. And now you see 70% of people feel emotionally attached to their home versus where they were in the pre-pandemic. I mean, that's a pretty big percentage move there. So home ownership is very much alive. It's probably never been more alive than it is right now, because people see the value of owning a home, which is great because it's a great wealth building strategy for the average person. Owning a home is a very important piece to the puzzle for everyone's wealth building strategy. So before we wrap up and go to the panel, let's just keep an eye on some other things as well. I don't know how many people outside of the industry have heard about Zillow's iBuying flop, but this is a headline from The Real Deal. Zillow listed nearly 2/3 of their homes that they purchased below the purchase price. That's kind of a big deal. There was a big upheaval in Zillow's stock price as a result of this iBuying flop that happened. Basically, Zillow was buying homes through the internet, right on their website. You could go and you could get a quote. They've suspended that through this year, and they're not sure whether they're going to bring it back or not. So I look at that honestly as a very good thing. I never saw the implementation of these iBuyers in the marketplace as a good thing, because now the average American is competing against these big companies buying these homes. That is not a good thing. We saw it happen with Blackstone down in the Florida market in particular during the worst part of the housing market. There was actually a bit of a bubble down in Florida during the worst part of the housing market because Blackstone was gobbling everything up and the average person couldn't buy the homes. The other thing that's important to note is we have such a great marketplace within the United States of America, which has been created by the real estate professionals in it, sharing data, getting good information out there, exchanging offers and negotiating. And we have a great marketplace out there that really empowers sellers to get the most amount of money that they can, and to have great support and help from realtors. So the iBuyers, to me, I'm sure they're not going away forever. And I'm sure that they're going to come back in every hot market that there is, as we've always seen, discount brokerages come in. That happened the last boom that happened. Now it was the iBuyers this time around. But at the end of the day, it's the real estate professionals who are getting it done for mom and pop and can really deliver the best value. So stick with us as realtors. Here's another thing that is important. Seller profits reached their highest level since the end of the Great Recession. That's important because a lot of people lost a lot of money and lost a lot of equity in their homes during the Great Recession. So check this out. Adam Data Solutions reported that profit margins on sales of medium-priced single-family homes grew to 47.6% in Q3 of 21, up from 42% in the second quarter of this year and up from 34.5% in Q3 of 2020 to reach the highest profit margin in 10 years. So that's a really good thing. And the reason why I say that is because it feels like we had a huge run up in the early 2000s, which had its crescendo in 2006, 2007, right around there. And then there was a massive decrease in home equity throughout the United States, really throughout the world, created by this Great Recession, created basically by these mortgage-backed securities and the whole mess that went on with subprime financing and this, that, the other thing. But it seems that it's been flushed out fully at this point. So a lot of people are made whole, which is good. That needed to happen. I also want everybody to keep an eye on inflation. I just don't know how you can not pay attention to this right now. I just found this so interesting. I pulled this information off of usinflationcalculator.com. Very cool website. I just discovered it while I was researching and preparing for this. Check that site out. There's some neat things on there. But when you look at this, you just take a look at these charts. Energy is the main reason for the major increase in inflation right now. And I guess to a certain extent, that's a good thing because a lot of our energy resources were taken offline, and you hope that the leadership in this country will come around on that and maybe get energy flowing again within the United States, because we were energy independent, for the last 5 or 6 years. We are not now. We seem to be begging OPEC and Russia to increase production so that we can reduce the cost of gasoline for all of us to fuel our cars and heat our homes with, oil and whatnot. But another thing that I found to be fascinating was this calculator there. And it went all the way back to like 1913 or something like that. It was a 2,000% return, but increase, I should say. But I was like, all right, how much has it increased in the last 30 years? And the cumulative rate of inflation is over 100% in 30 years. That's a bit scary to think that, the price of everything could double every 20 to 30 years. And the rate that we're on right now, it's going to double a hell of a lot faster than that. So just interesting to keep your mind on inflation, because at the end of the day, I've always said this, for people who are buying homes, it's all about monthly cash flow. People don't necessarily know what they can afford a home. They don't know, do I afford 500,000, 400,000, 200,000, whatever it is. They know I've got this amount of money I make every month and I can afford to spend this much on a mortgage, you know? So the more things cost, the more it eats into that monthly cash flow of the individual homeowner, the less they can afford to spend on a house. So inflation is important. Eventually it catches up and it eats into all assets, including real estate. Okay, so here are some stats, and I think this is important to look at. Take a look right over here, this pink line. To me, the mother's milk of all these stats is the number of homes that are actually selling, the units, right? So we saw a dip here, right? It's come down versus last year, but remember last year was a bit of an anomaly because it was this line here is 2020. There was the shutdown and there was hardly any transactions that happened during the busiest time of the year. And then there was all this pent up demand. So if you take a look at where the pink line is versus the other years, it's still very strong. Look at the variance between the pink line and all these others. So, you know, last year is a bit of an anomaly. Of course, there's going to be a huge run up during this period of time. I expect this pink line to remain above the previous years and into 2020, like we had just previously spoken about. Average home sale price still up. Pink line is 21. So we still have a very solid increase over last year and the previous years as well. I mean, look at the variance between the blue and the pink line. I mean, that is massive, you know, and it's still continuing to stay above last year's line in 2020. And months supply of inventory ticking up a little bit. That's good. We need to see that. We need to see more homes coming on the market. We need to see more new construction being done. So the more inventory that comes in, the more stable this whole marketplace can become and the more choice buyers have, which is a good thing. All right, so before we go to the panel, let's take care of some housekeeping here. You're going to join us, hopefully, for the next housing market update, December 21st at noon. We're always live at noon on the second Tuesday of the month. I think it's second or third. I don't know, whatever it is, December 21st. You can stay in touch with us at hmupdate.com. And thank you to our sponsor, NewOp, the Business Opportunity Exchange. What we like to say for NewOp is that if you're a mortgage banker or a realtor and you're not yet a member, you're missing the boat. Check it out at newop.com. All right, here's our panel. I'm going to stop my screen share and we're going to talk to them right now. So welcome, Vikki, Gian, and Keren. Let's start out with our realtors, Vikki Garby from Green Team New York Realty and Keren Gonen from Green Team New Jersey Realty. Ladies, any just initial comments on anything that was discussed in the slide deck? I have some questions, but I'll let you just voice whatever you have, thoughts, ideas.
I actually just wanted to mention that inventory going up is great for our buyers and obviously for our sellers. The market is getting softer. It's not as hot as it was several months ago. However, having more inventory just means that we have more options for our buyers. Houses that are listed today can still catch the tail end of what we've been seeing for the last 18 months, which is great. So if there's a seller on the fence, I tell them, you know, that this is it. They need to list now because we don't know what 2022 will look like for the sellers. We do know for the buyers that our mortgage rates will go up a bit, not compared to what it was before Corona, but there's still time to sell if you're looking to do so.
So Keren, you say it's not as hot. What do you mean by that? Like, what are you experiencing boots on the ground that's leading you to that conclusion?
So on our side of the border in Jersey, if a house is extremely overpriced, it will sit until the price is dropped. Whereas 6 months ago, you could have listed $50,000 above normal market pricing and you could get it and people would fight over it. I find that these days, those houses that are overpriced compared to what they should be are no longer selling, and they do sit or they sell for a lot less than they would have.
Okay. And just real quick, Vikki, I want to ask you the same thing. Do you agree with what Keren's saying? But to give everyone who's watching perspective, these two agents that you see in front of you, Vikki and Keren, they're both top 1% in their respective marketplaces. So these are people that are in it every day, working hard. They know what they're talking about. Vikki, do you agree with Keren, what she said?
Yes, I do. I think what's happened, you know, last year, certainly last summer, and then even earlier this spring, I think there were so many buyers in the market. Obviously, the spring is always the busiest time of year for us. Every family who's changing school districts with school age children is trying to find a home in the spring and hopefully close in the summer. So it's just a crazy time of year for us. So they all, I think, with the low inventory and the great number of buyers that we had, there was fear of missing out. People were throwing crazy offers at houses, and as long as they could appraise or, people had cash, they were closing those deals. I think what's happening now is exactly what Keren said. Sellers can't just slap any number on their house and expect a bidding war on it.
Yeah.
The buyers are becoming a little bit more, I don't know if educated is the right word, or thoughtful
Cautious
and careful before they're just,
yeah,
offering crazy numbers out there. And I do think that some of the appraisals have come in and like pushed back on the pricing. So I feel like it's going to level out.
So the appraisals, that's always one of my questions every month. You do feel that the appraisals are getting a little tighter and a little tougher to appraise at these numbers?
I think so, a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's comps, then they'll come through. But I know personally, as an agent, a lot of times our sellers don't want to look at our comps and take our advice. So, there's a little bit of a push there, and you do what you can to convince them and to show them the evidence. But at the end of the day, the appraisals go by the comps.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, one of the messages that I wanted to get through today was, if you're a seller and your home is on the market and it hasn't sold, and if you haven't had showings, you're probably way overpriced. If you have had showings and no offers, you're still overpriced. That has always been true, still is true now, and will always be true. All right. If you haven't had any showings now, that is provided that you have a competent agent who's responsive and is getting in touch with people that reach out to them, so on and so forth. You have good photography done of your listing, accurate data put out there. If you have that foundation and you've either had no showings, you're way overpriced. You haven't had any offers, but you have had showings, you're still overpriced. I can't say that enough. And, like Vikki and Keren are both saying here, again, top 1% of their marketplace, they know what they're talking about. You got to get serious about your asking price, as a seller, because this overly exuberant market, that ship has sailed. I think that is behind us. I don't think it's coming back anytime soon. I think that was an insane period of time. I talked to a lot of realtors from a lot of different areas that have been in the business a long time, and everyone says what they've gone through in the last 18 months, they've never seen before. It's been hard because people are fighting with each other to try to get the house and this, that, the other thing, but it's cooling off. And I don't see that coming back anytime soon. I think we're definitely headed towards a much more normal type of marketplace, which is a good thing. That fever pitch that we were in, it could not last forever. It wasn't healthy for the marketplace, in my opinion. It got us to a really good level, and it got a lot of people that were way down on their equity back to where they need to be. But now I think we're going to see a much more normal market as we go along. All right. Keren and Vikki, I want to get over to Gian with the 10 minutes or so left that we have, but did you want to chime in with anything else before we get into Gian's section? I don't see anybody. Go ahead.
I actually just wanted to mention that I have several buyers that, because the market is still hot, though it has gotten a bit softer, they're convinced that they're cursed. So I just want to tell all the buyers out there, you're not cursed.
No.
It's still a crazy market. Your agent is still doing the best they can for you. Don't give up hope. We'll find you a house.
Yeah. Stay in there, because, one other thing that I like to mention all the time is, well, what is your alternative?
Right.
If you're going to stay where you're going to buy for at least 5 to 6 years, if you can in your head say, if we buy a home, we're going to stay there 5 to 6 years. It doesn't really matter when you buy. You're going to be okay, And in that 5 or 6 years, what are you going to do? You're going to pay rent. Okay. So now you're not building any equity. You're not getting any sort of deductions on your taxes. It's just pure rent. It just is, poof, gone. That money that goes to nothing. So it's always best if you have at least a reasonable amount of runway ahead of you to stay in that place. It makes sense to buy, so it's worth staying the course and sticking with it.
Absolutely. Not to mention that rental prices are through the roof.
Exactly.
I can tell you that I have rentals that I'm putting up $600 to $700 a month more than we would be paying 2 years ago.
Right.
And they're flying off the shelves.
Yep.
So definitely a much better option.
That's a really good point, Karen. There's something to be said for that rental prices have actually shot up even more than sale prices have over the same period of time. And there's the other thing that also should be said, and I'm not going to get into it too much today. I'd like Gian and I have somebody that we're going to bring on to talk about the inflation hedge of owning real estate, but owning real estate is one of the greatest hedges against inflation that you can have. So that's yet another reason to buy a home now, because we're in this inflationary period. It's going to be good for you to own that real estate asset because it's going to increase in value. And so are the lending costs are going to increase in cost. So if you lock in now and it's more expensive down the road, that helps you as well.
So investors are having a blast.
Yeah. All signs point to, if you don't own a home yet, buy now. It is a good time to forge forward. So, all right, I'll stop talking. Gian, I'm going to bring you in. Thanks for being here. So Gian Russo of Northepointe, lender for many, many years, very experienced in this industry. My first question for you is, do you agree with the charts that we saw in the presentation that rates in between now and the next 12 months are going to land somewhere between 3.3 to 3.5 on a 30-year fixed basis? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's a clear reflection of what the Fed has come out and said they are going to do moving forward. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the Fed is the biggest buyer of all of the mortgage-backed securities out there. In fact, one of the only buyers. The Wall Street firms that are buying products that are not Fannie, Freddie, and FHA products. They're buying alternative products. So over the past 6 months, there's been talks about tapering their purchases. Then more recently, there have been talks about tapering. And now there's actually tapering going on. And what tapering is a reduction in buying the mortgage-backed securities.
Right. So Gian, hang on one second. We're going to assume that we have people watching this that don't know a lot about this industry. And I just want to real quick, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So the way that basically it works is you go into your local bank, right, to get a mortgage, or you deal with a guy like Gian at Northepointe or somebody else from wherever. They originate a mortgage for you, and that mortgage ultimately gets bought by another entity. All right. And then ultimately these get lumped into bigger securities and they trade and they get bought, this, that, the other thing. So the more money that's out there to buy these mortgages, the more available the whole process is to go. And usually the lower the rates, because there's so much money out there. There's a lot of competition for those loans. So therefore the rates are lower. But when the buyers of these loans kind of taper back, it means that there's less money available. There's less buyers. So now the people who are selling these loans need to raise the rates to make it attractive to the people with the money. So it's its own little marketplace within the marketplace. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. And to define some of those ambiguous terms of who these buyers are and where they wind up, the buyers are Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA, which is HUD. They're all government entities or government-sponsored entities. And eventually, it's the Fed that winds up buying those from Fannie and Freddie. So even our loans, which are banked, we eventually sell them to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, right, or to FHA, which is HUD. So does everybody else for the most part. Mm-hmm. And those wind up getting bought by the Federal Reserve. And as they are moving from talks about tapering to talks about tapering to now tapering, you're right, Jeff. Now there is going to be less money in the marketplace and more competition for that money Therefore, we're going to have to raise rates. In order to have them more attractive for purchase by the Fed.
Right.
So that tapering has already started.
Just to make the point real clear. So if you have loans on your books with very low rates, no one's going to buy them. So now you're stuck holding those loans. So you have to be able to sell that off so that you can keep your business going, right? All these mortgage lenders. So they have to raise the rates in order to make it competitive to be able to offload that loan and do another one.
Correct.
You know, that's the game.
Correct.
Yeah.
If our coupons are too low, there's no demand for that in the market anymore.
Right.
So we have to raise our coupon, which is in essence the interest rate. So that's the scary part of it in the headline that you referred to when you opened this meeting. But let's talk about really what that means. So for every 100,000 borrowed by your clients and my clients, our joint clients, 50 basis points to the rate, which is 3% moving to 3.5%, that will cost your borrower $28 a month. So whatever the average home
deal. Not a big deal. That's
not a big deal at all.
Like $28 a month per half a point
to the rate
for $100,000. So if you're at 500, it's 28 times 5, right? To make it simple for the viewer. Yep.
Right. And if you're taking a $500,000 loan, you're buying a $600,000 or $700,000 house. I would venture to guess that $170 a month is not going to break your cash flow. If you're buying a $700,000 home.
That's right. So the takeaway is we don't need to live in fear over rising mortgage interest rates because the rate at which they're increasing is just not a big deal.
Correct. And what the market analysis on the refinances doesn't necessarily show is a lot of the ancillary stuff I'll bring up in a second. But what that 62% reduction is an algorithm that says if your rate is X, you need to reduce it by so much to be considered a refinance. And we will then say you're eligible for refinance. Well, if we take 50 basis points out of that spread, that algorithm just says, well, now 62% are not qualified. However, it doesn't take into consideration a lot of factors. One, it doesn't take into consideration, one of my favorite lines is, I don't like to count the money in somebody's pocket. $200 a month might be worth the world to somebody, even though this algorithm says, well, that's only a reduction that doesn't qualify. So you're not a refinance, but it is now a refinance because they want that $200 savings. It does not take into account debt consolidation loans. It does not take into account cash out loans. It is a pure reflection of the interest rates that are out there in the marketplace versus what their definition of enough lowering of that rate to consider it a refinance. And they're just saying, well, if that lower goes up by 50 basis points, it's going to whack out this amount of refinance potentials. It doesn't take into account all of the three criterion that I just talked about. So whether or not we're going to see 62% or not, I don't believe we're going to see that kind of a reduction. And B, I think there are going to be other products out there for people to refinance that algorithm also doesn't take into consideration, because that is a Fannie, Freddie, and FHA style interest rate algorithm.
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is there any I mean, you tell me, just making common sense of things, if the refinance business drops off for the mortgage industry, does it then improve things for purchasers of homes because now you don't have enough going on as a lender industry in the refinance area? So now you might want to attract more people to do purchase mortgages, so maybe that helps keep rates at a lower rate, or is it purely based upon how much money the Fed is infusing into the marketplace?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when refinances drop, overall mortgage volume drops.
Right.
Therefore, our costs go up unless we start to cut staff.
Okay.
And that becomes an interesting algorithm as well. If we're doing less loans, I mean, we have fixed overhead.
Yep. Right.
And if we're doing less volume,
yep.
Well, then our profit margins decrease as an industry.
So really, it's exactly opposite of what I said. A robust refinance market actually helps the home purchasers as well.
It does, because it allows a better ROI for us as mortgage lenders, as mortgage banks, as banks in the
Therefore,
space.
you can compete against each other with lower rates, and because there's more profit to be ultimately distributed that way.
Yeah, it's an old adage that says volume cures all ails.
Right.
In the mortgage business.
I think that's in any business, I mean, it's about revenue, can you ratchet up your revenue and keep your expenses at bay, I mean, that's what it's all about. Okay. We're a little bit over budget on time, but that was a really good explanation of things. Maybe the best one I've heard here yet on the housing market update. So hopefully everybody caught that. We hope to have you back again, Gian. Do you have anything else real quick that you want to get across that might be important for a home buyer or a home seller?
I do. Most folks, and you talked about these iBuyers and why we should stick with realtors. These transactions are complex. They've become more complex as the market has gone in directions that we've never seen in 25 years that I've been in the business.
Right.
And I think that it's equally as important to stick with a one-on-one lender as it is to stick with a one-on-one realtor, simply because, yes, the Rocket Mortgages of the world and all those guys who have call centers out in Detroit and Idaho, although their rates might be the best, they're not designed for complex situations, scenarios, out-of-the-box products, or any of those types of things. And we see a lot of that in this market. And as inventory drops, as rates go up, those out-of-the-box products and those out-of-the-box deals are going to help keep our business at the levels we want them to be at.
Right.
And those types of folks just don't have, A, those products, B, the familiarity with those things, or C, the ability to handhold, just like the realtors have the ability to handhold these deals through to the end. We do as well on the local level. So I think that's an important thing when these iBuyers are going into the markets. And they're doing it on the mortgage side too. Zillow just announced they're going to have a mortgage company.
Yeah. There's no end to it, but I liken realtors and mortgage bankers to grease on the wheels. Not that we're greasy or slimy, because we're not. The majority of us are not. But we are the grease on the wheels. Like, it's these professionals that are in it day to day, making things happen, pushing deals through, that really create this robust marketplace that everyone has the benefit of. I mean, if you go to other countries around the world, it is not like what it is here in the United States. It is not as fluid, as smooth, as well documented, information right at fingertips. It's very different, in other places. And I think we've done a really good job as a realtor and mortgage banker, part of the process to really build a robust marketplace. So, okay, let me, Gian, thanks again. Here is everybody's information for those viewers at home, how you can get in touch with Keren, Vikki, Gian, myself, if you're interested. If you're watching this as a professional in this industry and you want to be a panelist, you can reach out to us as well. And we can talk about having you on. So thanks everybody for being here. We'll leave it at that, and we'll check in with you again in December. Thanks for being here, everybody.